Picture it's 1945, and Germany is literally falling apart. Allied bombers are pounding cities into rubble every night. But in a secret facility, two brothers, just regular guys who couldn't stop thinking about airplanes, are putting the finishing touches on something that looks like it fell out of a sci-fi movie. I'm talking about the Horten HO 229, and when I first saw photos of it, I thought it looked more like a modern stealth fighter than anything that should have existed in 1945. This wasn't just some crazy idea scribbled on paper. They actually built it. It flew, and if certain things had gone differently, if one test pilot hadn't died, if the war had lasted just a few more months, well, we might be living in a very different world. So get comfortable. What I'm about to share will completely change your perception of what was possible in 1945. Let me introduce you to Reimar and Walter Horten. While other kids were out playing soccer, or whatever kids did in 1930s Germany, these two were in their garage, building gliders and sketching aircraft designs. In the 1930s, when airplanes still looked like flying refrigerators with wings bolted on, the Hortons looked at that and said, "This is stupid. There's got to be a better way." Their idea? What if the entire aircraft was the wing? I know what you're thinking. That sounds simple, right? Trust me, it wasn't. They called it a flying wing. No separate body, no tail sticking out the back. Just one smooth, triangular shape cutting through the air like a shark fin. The benefits were wild. Way less drag, which meant crazy high speeds. Smaller profile for radar to bounce off. More room inside for fuel and bombs. But, and this is a massive but, these things were absolute nightmares to fly. Without a tail to keep them stable, flying wings wanted to flip and tumble like a paper airplane in a tornado. Every aerospace engineer in the world said it couldn't be done. But the Horten brothers? They said, "Watch us." They started building gliders in their spare time. These weren't rich kids with fancy educations. They were just two guys with an obsession and way too much time on their hands. And somehow, impossibly, they started making it work. By 1943, Nazi Germany was getting hammered. And I mean every single night. Allied bombers were turning German cities into parking lots. The Luftwaffe was running on fumes, literally. They were out of fuel, out of experienced pilots, and honestly, out of hope. That's when Hermann Göring, the Nazi Air Force chief, remembered hearing about these two brothers building a UFO-looking aircraft in their backyard. Now here's where this story gets dark. The Nazi leadership was desperate for what they called Wunderwaffen, wonder weapons. Magic bullets that could somehow turn this whole nightmare around. And the Horten brothers' flying wing design? It checked every single box on their wish list. Faster than anything the Allies had? Check. Invisible to radar? Check. Could carry enough bombs to level a city? Double check. The Horten brothers weren't Nazi scientists from some war movie. Everything out there suggests they were just two guys who loved building airplanes. They loved solving impossible puzzles. They loved pushing the boundaries of what was possible. Put them in America 50 years later, and they'd probably be working for NASA. When the Nazi government showed up offering unlimited money and resources to build their dream aircraft, what choice did they have? It was the ultimate bargain. The brothers got to pursue their obsession. The Nazis got a potential wonder weapon. So, Hermann Göring came up with this completely insane shopping list. He called it the 3x1000 requirement. 1,000 kilograms of bombs, 1,000 kilometers of range, 1,000 kilometers per hour speed. In 1943, asking for all three things was like asking someone to invent teleportation. Most German bombers back then could reach British targets, but they were getting slaughtered by Allied fighters. The problem was simple math. The new jet engines could give you the speed, but they guzzled fuel like a drunk sailor. You couldn't get the range. But the Horten brothers heard this impossible demand, and their reaction wasn't to laugh or walk away. They looked at each other and said, "What if we just throw out everything we know about airplane design?" They pulled out their old flying wing designs and started scaling them up. And I mean way, way up. They came up with the HO229, this massive triangular beast that looks like something from a 1950s sci-fi B movie. 2 jet engines buried inside the wing. A cockpit that was a glass bubble. These swept-back edges made it look like a manta ray gliding through water. Building this thing in 1943 was like trying to make an iPhone using parts from a 1940s radio. Jet engines? Brand new technology that barely worked. Radar-absorbing materials didn't exist. Computer-aided design? It wouldn't be invented for another 20 years. These guys were basically trying to build a stealth fighter using slide rules and determination. And somehow, they thought they could make it work. The Horten brothers were basically making stuff up as they went along, like 2 guys building a rocket ship in their garage. The frame was built using wood and steel tubing, which sounds primitive until you realize that these were literally the only materials still available in wartime Germany. Everything else was going to build tanks or other weapons, but the shape? It was unlike anything anyone had ever attempted. This wing had to be strong enough to hold 2 screaming jet engines and perfectly smooth to slip through the air like a knife. The brothers came up with their way of building with wood, multiple thin sheets pressed together with glue, layer by layer. It sounds simple, but the result was something both incredibly tough and smooth as glass. They had no idea they were creating stealth technology. The wood soaked up radar signals instead of bouncing them back. Those weird angles scattered radio waves in every direction, except back to the radar operator. The Hortons thought they were just building a fast bomber, but they accidentally built an invisible one. Sometimes the best innovations happen when you're not even trying. The first prototype, called the V1, was finished in late 1944. But this was just a glider, no engines. They wanted to test the basic flight characteristics before strapping rockets to it. Looking back, they probably made the most intelligent decision in this crazy project. The real excitement would come with the V2, the version with actual jet engines. That's when things were going to get interesting, or should I say, terrifying. March 1st, 1944. A cold morning at an airfield near Göttingen. Test pilot Lieutenant Erwin Ziller, this guy was Germany's version of Chuck Yeager, walked around the HO229 V1 glider one final time. Every surface, every cable, every rivet. This was it. After years of sketches, arguments, failed calculations, and probably too many sleepless nights, the flying wing was finally ready. It looked alien. It's like someone had dropped a piece of 1980s technology into 1944. Allied intelligence would later describe it as looking like a manta ray, or something not of this world. But something magical happened when Ziller got towed into the sky in this engineless glider. It flew beautifully. Imagine being up there, piloting something that looks like it was designed on another planet, with no idea if you're about to make history or become a flat pancake. But the aircraft was stable, it was controllable, and even without engines, it was fast enough to impress everyone watching. All those years of hand calculations with slide rules, all those theories about flying wings that everyone said were impossible, came together at that moment. Word of the successful test shot up the Nazi chain of command. Suddenly, everyone from local commanders to the guys in Berlin wanted to know about these Horten brothers. But here's the thing about success in Nazi Germany. It came with a price. More attention meant more pressure. More pressure meant impossible deadlines. The HO229 V2 was a completely different animal. Two UMO 004 turbojet engines, the same ones powering the Me-262 jet fighter. But here's where things got tricky. How do you stuff two screaming hot jet engines inside a wing without everything catching fire? The engines had to go deep inside the wing. No easy access panels like on regular planes. If something broke, mechanics would have to practically crawl inside the aircraft to fix it. Then there was the heat. Jet engines get hot enough to melt aluminium. All that heat had to go somewhere that wasn't setting the wooden wing on fire. The Horten brothers figured it out with typical German thoroughness. Cooling ducts, heat shields, fireproof barriers. From the outside, the HO229 looked sleek and simple. Inside was a maze of pipes and panels. Test pilot Erwin Ziller took the V2 up for its first powered flight on February 18, 1945, and the performance was mind-blowing. It could outrun any Allied fighter in the sky. It could carry enough bombs to flatten a city block. And according to some reports, radar operators couldn't even see it coming. For a brief, terrifying moment, it looked like the Nazis might have their wonder weapon. The thing that could change everything. February 18th, 1945. The same day as that incredible first jet-powered flight. Erwin Ziller was getting ready for his second flight of the day. The morning had gone perfectly, and everyone was pumped to push the aircraft a little harder. During takeoff, one of those UMO 004 engines just died, flamed out right after liftoff. If you've ever tried to ride a bicycle with one pedal, you know how this would end. The HO229, running on only one engine, became completely uncontrollable. During Ziller's final radio transmissions, this man fought hard to keep that aircraft in the air. He knew what this project meant and what was at stake. But asymmetric thrust is a physics problem you can't solve with courage. The flying wing rolled over and slammed into the ground. Ziller was killed instantly. The V2 prototype, years of work, millions of Reichsmarks, the hopes of an entire program, was destroyed. In one terrible moment, the HO229 program lost its most experienced test pilot and most advanced prototype. Years of their lives gone. Their friend gone. Their dream literally burning in a field. But the tragedy was about to get much, much worse. As Allied forces were closing in on Germany from every direction. The secret facilities where they were developing the HO229 were about to be overrun. The brothers had weeks, maybe days, before their entire operation would be captured or destroyed. This was crunch time. They had to act fast if they were to save anything from this disaster. The question was, would there be enough time? Despite this tragedy, German leadership was so impressed that it compelled Goering to order 40 production aircraft. They were so excited about the speed that they decided to switch the HO229 from a bomber to a fighter, armed with 30mm cannons. The Horten brothers weren't even at the test flights anymore. They'd been pulled off to work on a crazier project called the America Bomber that was supposed to reach the United States. However, work continued on prototypes V3 through V7. One was supposed to be a two-seat night fighter, another was an armament testbed. The problem was that by early 1945, Germany was falling apart. The Allies were literally fighting inside German borders. In the underground factories, workers kept building the V3 prototype by lamplight, trying to avoid the constant bombing. These people knew the war was lost, but they kept working anyway. Maybe they just had to finish what they started. Meanwhile, the German leadership had this impossible argument. Should they build conventional fighters that could fly missions today? or keep betting on experimental aircraft that might never be ready. The HO-229 was caught in the middle. Too advanced to mass produce quickly, too promising to abandon. Allied tanks were getting closer every day. Time was running out fast. April 1945. Patton's Third Army was rolling through Germany, mopping up the last resistance. When American soldiers reached a little place called Friedrichsroda, they expected the usual, maybe some German stragglers, some bombed buildings, just another stop on the way to victory. Instead, they found something that would change aviation history forever. Hidden in workshops and scattered across airfields were 4 Horten prototypes, including the nearly completed V3. And when the Americans pulled the canvas covers off these aircraft, they didn't know what they were looking at. "It doesn't look like anything we've built," wrote Colonel Harold Watson, who led the investigation. "It looks like something from a movie." These guys had seen everything the war had to offer: German rockets, jet fighters, guided missiles. But this was different. This looked like it had crash-landed from 1975. The Americans immediately understood they'd stumbled onto something huge. Within days, engineers swarmed the site, photographed every bolt, and copied every blueprint. They also tracked down every German engineer they could find. What they discovered terrified them, because the performance data suggested this thing could outrun anything the Allies had. It was nearly invisible to radar. And if Germany had figured this out just 12 months earlier, well, D-Day might have been a very different story. Allied bomber formations would have been helpless against aircraft they couldn't see coming. The Americans packed everything, prototypes, blueprints, name it, and shipped it back to the United States. And that nearly complete V3 prototype, it ended up at the Smithsonian, where you can see it today. Here's where this story gets wild. The HO-229 didn't die when Germany surrendered. American engineers took one look and realized they were holding the blueprint for the future of military aviation. They studied every rivet, every curve, every design choice the Horten brothers had made. And you can see their influence everywhere in modern aircraft. Look at the B-2 stealth bomber. Those angular wings, that triangular shape. The resemblance isn't a coincidence. The F-117 Nighthawk stealth fighter? Same story. Modern UAVs and drones. They're flying the Horten brothers' dream. In 2008, engineers at Northrop Grumman built a full-scale replica of the HO-229 and tested it with modern radar systems. The results were shocking. This aircraft, built with 1940s wood and glue technology, had stealth characteristics comparable to modern fighters. The Horten brothers had accidentally invented stealth technology 30 years before anyone else understood radar absorption. The invasion of Normandy might have failed under attack from aircraft that radar couldn't detect, but it remained a prototype, a glimpse of a terrifying alternate history, rather than the weapon that changed everything. The Horten brothers survived the war. Raymar kept designing flying wings well into the 1980s. Their ideas lived on in aerospace programs around the world. Today, every stealth aircraft flying carries a piece of what 2 German brothers figured out in their workshop in the 1930s. Not bad for a couple of guys who just really loved the idea of making airplanes fly better. So that's the incredible story of the Horten HO-229, 2 brothers who accidentally invented the future of aviation while building what they thought was just a fast bomber. Could the HO-229 have changed how the war ended if it had been ready 6 months earlier? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Some of your suggestions may lead to the next video. If this story fascinated you, hit that subscribe button. See you in the next one.